Imperial Rome, an epoch of grandeur and expansion and of bitter power struggles. In the year 68 AD, the much-hated Emperor Nero committed suicide, triggering a fight for power. In the year following his death, 4 different emperors ruled one after the other in swift succession. 2 were murdered, 1 killed himself, and the last one prevailed. Titus Flavius Vespasianus was born into a relatively undistinguished family, but he'd become a successful military commander involved in crushing the Jewish revolt in Judea. In Rome, the power struggle was in full swing, and Vespasian seized the opportunity. He had the support of the majority of legions, and in December 69, he was confirmed by the Senate as princeps, the first citizen of the state. As Imperator Kaiser Vespasianus Augustus, he became a well-liked ruler and the head of a new dynasty. He was aware of popular expectations. Despite the power wielded by the Roman emperors, they were not only dependent on the support of the legions, but also on the favor of the Senate and the people. The republican facade had to be maintained. As a demonstrative gesture, Vespasian planned a giant building in the garden of the palace that Nero had built in the center of Rome.
E dunque il Colosseo sorge in una area chiave per la nascita della dinastia Flavia.
The Colosseum was built on a spot that played a decisive role in the birth of the Flavian dynasty. This dynasty followed the Julian-Claudian dynasty after the end of Nero. Vespasian decided to give back to the city the area that Nero had seized after the fire in the year 64 in order to create a lake for his huge Domus Aurea. It was an area stretching from the Palatine Hill to the site known today as the Domus Aurea. To drain this lake and lay a foundation for the Colosseum, an enormous ring was excavated and filled with layers of cement to achieve a final height of around 14 meters.
Con 2 strati di conglomerato che hanno un'altezza di circa 14 metri.
The funds to pay for this were provided by Vespasian's son Titus. He had finished off the conquest of the Jews, destroyed the temple in Jerusalem, and brought the spoils to Rome. An incredible treasure. The 7-armed menorah was said to have been made of 30 kilograms of pure gold. The plundered gold from the temple was badly needed for Vespasian's ambitious construction plans. The giant building site was only 200 meters from the Forum. This was no coincidence. The temples and basilicas in the area were important sites of Roman public life. This was the economic, religious, and political heart of the city. Next to it, Vespasian set his triumphal monument, the Amphitheatrum Flavium. The term Colosseum didn't gain wide acceptance until 1,000 years later. But the colossal amphitheatre eclipsed everything that had come before. It was the most modern piece of public architecture in the empire, and it was completed in less than 8 years.
Non è nota la figura che ha l'anima di questo progetto, ma è
We don't know who designed this project, but it's clear that there was a master plan, a plan that was carried out by various different people. We see it as an extremely active and productive construction site.
Veramente un cantiere molto attivo, molto
4 teams worked simultaneously on 4 sections that were divided into the 4 entrances on the main and minor axes.
Che lavoravano a 4 settori contemporaneamente, quindi proprio suddividendole con le 4 principali accessi sugli assi maggiore e minore dell'ellisse.
The ground plan of the Colosseum is in the shape of an ellipse. It's clear that there was a coordinator or some figure who thought up this impressive architecture. Its structural elements were taken up by architecture in the following centuries. The classical orders of the columns later became an inspirational motif for the architecture of the Renaissance.
Degli secoli successivi, la sovrapposizione degli ordini diventa poi anche un motivo di ispirazione per l'architettura del Rinascimento.
The word amphitheatre actually means both-sided theatre. The dimensions are gigantic, more than 52 meters tall, 188 meters long, and 156 wide, with an area of over 3,000 square meters. More than 200,000 tons of travertine limestone were used in the building, hewn by slaves from nearby quarries. The exterior has monumental decorations on 3 stories. The 3 classical orders are in evidence: the Doric columns in the lower area, in the middle the Ionic, and the Corinthian order on the upper story. More than 160 bronze statues were set up. Inspired by Greek mythology, they adorned the arches of the 2nd and 3rd levels. 40 panels commemorated Roman military conquests. Barriers in front of the entrances channeled the flow of the crowd. The building seated more than 50,000 spectators, distributed over 4 stories. Reportedly, it took no more than 8 minutes for everyone to take their designated seats. For that, they received a kind of ticket indicating one of the 80 numbered entrances and the exact staircase. The senators and vestals, the Roman priestesses, entered through the south entrance onto the podium. It was made entirely of marble, and the access stairways were decorated with fanciful animal figures. The 2nd and 3rd tiers of the cavea, the largest part of the spectator space, were reserved for citizens and knights. Women could not enter here. Along with the slaves, they were seated in the uppermost story. On the side of the arena, this area was decorated with 80 marble columns. Everyone, whether knight, citizen, woman, or slave, knew exactly where their place was, in the amphitheatre as in society. The building was a perfect mirror of the Roman class system. A trick of the construction prevented all the tiers from emptying at the same time after the spectacle. The ordinary people still thronged the deliberately narrowed corridors of the upper stories after the senators had already exited the theatre. Today, architects continue to build stadiums according to the same principle. The Flavian amphitheatre is the mother of all stadiums. And, like today, all eyes were on the VIP seats. The emperor and his family entered the imperial box by way of a sumptuously decorated private entrance. For them, the giant amphitheatre had a chiefly political purpose. That was nothing new. The Colosseum was the largest arena, but it was not the first. There were already amphitheatres throughout the empire. Self-promoting citizens with the necessary money financed games for the populace. This enabled the sponsor, known as editor, to display his wealth and use the spectacle to further his interests, in a political campaign, for example. Members of the upper crust of Roman society strove to outdo each other, even if some went heavily into debt to put on such displays. The emperors had long recognized the power of the games. They enacted decrees on safety, set up authorities to organize the games, and used them to further their own aims. The empire was growing in size. Senators from the provinces were now permitted in the government. Even in the capital, residents no longer knew their leaders personally. The games were a welcome occasion to present the new power elites to the Roman middle-class public.
The
emperors used the amphitheatre to reach a broad consensus with all strata of society, but mainly the middle class and the plebs. For that purpose, the spectacles in the Colosseum could last for up to 120 days. In shared bloodlust, the emperor, the patricians, and the populace joined to form a single mass. An important role was played by the awning called the velarium. The enormous canvas cloth was attached by ropes to 240 ship's masts that were affixed to the facade. To construct this technical masterpiece, sailors were brought in especially from the Misenum military harbour. The velarium not only protected the crowd from the sun, it also became the artificial sky of the arena's own cosmos. It was saturated with scented water that dripped onto spectators for refreshment, and even dropped nuts, dates, plums, pastries, or rose petals. The winning tickets in a lottery provided people with animals that had been slaughtered in the arena, or free visits to brothels. This was more than just bread and circuses. At the center of these spectacles was the emperor, deciding godlike over life and death. And he exhibited that divine power not only to the Roman spectators gathered here, but to the entire world. Contemporaries reported that not even the wonders of the ancient world could surpass this arena. Let Memphis be silent about the wonder of the pyramids, nor let Assyrian industry boast of Babylon. You soft Ionians, be not extolled for Trivia's temple. All your labors must bow to the superiority of Caesar's amphitheatre. Instead of all, fame will celebrate one work alone. That's how the poet Martial eulogized the monument. Vespasian himself did not live to see his vision realized. He died 1 year before it was completed. In the summer of the year 80, it was his son and successor Titus who opened the amphitheatre with inaugural games that would last 100 days. The opening featured a special kind of show, sea battles in the midst of the city.